It begins with irony, doesn't it? The very party that cannot spell Britain, the very leader of the party that cannot spell Britain on its campaign literature now wishes to lecture universities on education standards. Kemi Badenoch's attack on so-called Mickey Mouse degrees is not only Philistine, or as Milton would say, Philistian, it is a category mistake of the very first order. She confuses economic return with intellectual worth. She confuses utility with wisdom and wage slips with civilization. Her proposal is simple and simplistic. Shut down degrees that lead to low earnings, English, design, anthropology, sociology, media, psychology, and funnel the savings into apprenticeships. It sounds decisive. It is, in truth, reactionary populism disguised as fiscal prudence. Oh, and by the way, Jeremy Corbyn had a fairly similar idea. He thought that you should fund those degrees that were on the sort of send list, the utilitarian degrees, and not fund the other degrees, the degrees like English, psychology, sociology, anthropology, design, and so on. I remember having this discussion with Jeremy Corbyn's brother a long time ago on a train. This simply is not serious. Now, nobody serious opposes apprenticeships. They're valuable, often underfunded, and too long treated as the poor cousin of higher education. But apprenticeships and degrees are not competing philosophies. They're complementary routes to knowledge. The distinction Badenoch draws is false. Apprenticeships produce skills. Universities cultivate the mind. I loved the distinction between the old polytechnic and the university. Both are necessary for a functioning society. Badenoch's logic is utilitarian in the narrowest sense. By her measure, a philosophy degree is a failure if its holder earns less than an accountant. But the world cannot run on accountants alone. It needs people who question, analyse, create, empathise and criticise, people who can actually earn the money the accountants then measure. Capacities born not of spreadsheets, but of the humanities. Badenoch and her allies cite the Institute for Fiscal Studies statistic that 30% of graduates see no economic return. What they omit is that 80% earn more than non-graduates, and the lifetime earnings of graduates are on average 20% higher. The creative industries, those very sectors that this mad person disparages, contribute £125 billion annually to the UK economy and employ 2.4 million people. By comparison, the fishing and steel industries combined are worth a fraction of that. It's not to say they aren't valuable, they are. To describe English or media as a rip-off subject is not merely ignorant, it is economically illiterate. Every film set, theatre production, museum, video game or advertising campaign is populated by graduates of these supposedly worthless degrees. Badenoch's policy wouldn't save Britain money, it would hollow out one of its few remaining global success stories. A party that once revered Churchill, a Nobel laureate in literature, now derides English degrees. A party that boasts of conserving British tradition now wishes to dismantle the very disciplines that preserve it. Does Badenoch truly believe that Shakespeare, Austen or Orwell were indulgences, that music, theatre and art are luxuries rather than lifeblood? That the poetry that was so beloved, the Victorian poetry that was so beloved of Margaret Thatcher, is irrelevant? This is not conservatism, this is utilitarian vandalism. It reduces education to a training course for a job market, and it ignores its deeper civic purpose to form citizens capable of discernment, creativity and moral judgment. The idea that only STEM subjects matter is as wrong-headed as Corbyn's notion that all should be prioritised equally for social justice. Both misunderstand education's purpose. Corbyn believed that everything should be utilitarian and should be funded by the state. I must say I'm inclined to agree with that, but I think all subjects should actually be funded by the state, though there should be significantly less students in university. That would be my solution. But the point of studying English or theology or sociology is not immediate utility, but intellectual discipline. Such study teaches one to read critically, argue coherently, write clearly, think independently. These are not decorative skills. They are the foundation of every profession that requires judgment. That's law, journalism, public administration, diplomacy, and dare I say even politics. Perhaps Badenoch's own speechwriters might have benefited from a few more English graduates before misspelling the country's name. Education is not a transaction between taxpayer and employee. It's an investment in the moral and cultural fabric of the nation. A society that funds only what is profitable soon forgets what is valuable. Universities are not factories for producing labour units, they are repositories of civilization. Francesca Simon, whose rip-off medieval studies degree led her to create Horrid Henry, puts it beautifully. One studies for the love of learning, not for a guaranteed job. The ability to think critically and creatively is the truest safeguard against tyranny, conformity, and ignorance. As a Zimbabwean student once said, we need philosophers to stop people like Idi Amin taking over. The attack on Mickey Mouse degrees plays rather well to those who resent universities as bastions of liberalism. It's an old anti-intellectual reflex designed and dressed in the language of fiscal responsibility, but it is precisely the humanities that teach us how to spot demagoguery, propaganda, and lazy thinking. That is why the populist right finds them so threatening. Badenoch's rhetoric rests on two delusions: that education's worth is measurable only in pounds, and that ignorance is a virtue. Her vision of Britain is a land of obedient technicians, useful, employable, but unreflective. A country that ceases to teach its young how to imagine, question, and interpret soon loses the capacity to lead, to govern, or even to spell its own name correctly, as she demonstrates. We need both the artisan and the artist, the engineer and the historian, the coder and the poet. Universities must be places where thought is cultivated for its own sake, not merely for its market value. Apprenticeships should be expanded, yes, but not at the expense of thought, language, and culture. The phrase Mickey Mouse degree is not an argument, it's a sneer. It betrays a contempt for learning itself. In the end, Badenoch's policy is not about economics or efficiency. It's about ideology, an ideology that fears intellect, mocks culture, and confuses education with instruction. What's wrong with the Mickey Mouse degree? If somebody studied Mickey Mouse with the discipline, the severity, the confidence that one might study law or biology, or that one might study for a medical degree, then one would be training the mind in the same way, exactly the same way. And a trained mind can be applied to new things. A trained mind is adaptable, and the modern world needs people who can adapt like that. If Badenoch had read more English, she might recall John Milton's warning that a good book is the precious lifeblood of a master spirit. A nation that cuts off that lifeblood for short-term political applause condemns itself to a poverty far deeper than fiscal depth. The poverty of the mind. I shouldn't have said depth, I should have said debt. It's I despair of Badenoch in a way that I despair of foolishness. Badenoch, and why did I say the word depth there? Because Badenoch has none. And that's what I was thinking of. Badenoch lacks depth. Badenoch is all show and no depth. And I find it very disturbing that she is on the right, that Starmer, who seems incapable of expressing depth, is on the left, that Farage, who has no hinterland, no apparent thought except what comes out of his mouth, is on the further right. There are people in the House of Commons who have depth, and I wish we could hear more from them.